Hey, happy Friday afternoon. This is Jim with the Brewers Association of Maryland, checking in with you again for a wonderful episode of Fermented Friday. I apologize for the delayed start time. It seems like the clouds out here in Frederick have slowed down my internet somehow, so I'm going to blame it on the weather. But I've got a great group of guests joining me today. If you're tuning in, you probably already know that we'll have Heavy Seas beer on, which means that we'll be joined by Hugh Sisson and Chris Leonard, both from Heavy Seas, to talk about this awesome brand. I've had a lot of fun getting to know Hugh over my years in the beer industry. He's a great personality, great forefather of Maryland beer. So this is going to be an awesome conversation. Please, throughout this chat, if you're watching live, throw your questions and comments into our comments sections. We'd love to have you be a part of this conversation. We hope to learn everything we can about Heavy Seas today and the history of this awesome brewery and learn more about the great beers that they're brewing. Before we jump into that, I do just want to remind everybody, Maryland's breweries remain open for business a year into this craziness with COVID. We have some very innovative and entrepreneurial people running these great breweries throughout the state. All of them have the opportunity to serve you delicious beer this weekend. So whether you're picking beer up for curbside pickup, carrying beer out, or going to visit your favorite local brewery, please go out, show your support to these small businesses. And show them the love that they deserve. They're making great beer for you. They're employing your neighbors, and they're making a difference in your community. The last piece that I wanted to state on today's talk is BAM's appreciation to the General Assembly for the passage of bills that we were in support of this year. The impact that this is going to have with shipping to consumers in Maryland and direct delivery of beer is going to be a significant lifeline to our state's breweries during this hardship. Even though we see the light at the end of the tunnel, there's a lot going on. We want to make sure that our breweries can stay whole and that they can get you the beer that you need and would love safely and with as little effort as possible. So show your support to Maryland beer, order for delivery, carry out, pick up, whatever you want to do. Go visit a brewery, have fun, stay safe, wear your mask, and we'll see you soon. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Hugh Sisson. Hugh, how are you this afternoon?
I am just peachy, thank you.
And Chris Leonard. Chris, how are you?
I'm great. I'm thirsty, actually, but thanks.
I feel bad that you're going to have to drink alone during this one. I totally forgot to grab a beer before I got on the stream, so there you go.
He's not drinking alone.
Oh, okay, good.
It's a little early for me on a Friday, but not by much.
Hey, we've got about an hour till happy hour, right?
Yeah.
Well, cheers, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
So, Hugh, this is a fun conversation for us to be having because I'm going to ask you the history of Heavy Seas and the background to everything that is Heavy Seas beer. But you and I have had a couple of conversations already this week about the history of BAM and trying to figure out exactly when this started.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, BAM is sort of, it's part and parcel of the Heavy Seas history. I mean, if you take the history back far enough, it kind of starts with my family's bar restaurant, which was called Sisson's, which was on Cross Street. And well, at the time we called it South Baltimore. They now call it Federal Hill. So I turned Sisson's into a beer joint probably back in 81, 82 when nobody was doing beer joints. And we were, I think, Maryland's first draft Guinness account, for example. Anyway, long story short, my dad and I kind of said, gee, what would happen if we could actually make beer here? That's probably 1983. I think there are 4 operating brew pubs in the entire country at the time. It's not legal in probably 40 of the 50 states. There's no template. You got to understand, when you're going back this far, I mean, nowadays, guy decides he wants to open a brewery. He picks up the phone. He calls. He says, hello, yes. I'd like to order a brewery, please. Next week will be fine. Thank you. Click. And that's done. Well, that didn't exist. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. We don't know where we could find the stuff to do it with. We had to go to England and Scotland a couple of times, just doing some research. So in any event, we kind of pieced together that we could figure out how to do it, but it wasn't legal in the state of Maryland. we put a bill in the Maryland legislature in 1987 to legalize brew pubs. I fully expected it to fail. It passed. I had the immediate OF moment. I better get this done now before somebody beats me to it. So in August of 1989, Sisson's became the first brew pub in the state of Maryland, and I was the brewer. I stayed there for another 5 years and then left to start Clipper City Brewing Company, which is the parent company for Heavy Seas beer, which we began brewing in December of 95. So we just closed out 25 years of operations. And that, for various reasons, due to brand development, marketing, et cetera, I guess in about maybe the year 2000 or so, we spun off a second brand to Clipper City called Heavy Seas, and that really became the dominant card for us to play. So we focused everything on that beginning in 2010, and that's the skinny. Chris Leonard came on board. What's it, like 7 years ago now, Chris?
In my 8th year.
All right. See, I'm got the senior moment. I don't remember. I have CSS or CRS, which means can't remember. There you go. In any event, and Chris has been just a terrific overall stabilizing influence on the company, as well as a massive qualitative addition. And a lot of our more recent success is directly attributable to his efforts.
Well, those are some huge accolades, Chris. Way to go. And Hugh, thank you for the great background. I'm curious, where in this process of starting at Sisson's did you get this idea that the next step was to open a larger brewery? Was the idea like you're so in love with making this great beer that's the move, or was there just opportunity on the horizon?
I just saw it more as opportunity on the horizon, and I also one of the issues with Sisson's, which is, it depends how you want to define an issue, but it was a small family business, and I knew that the only way that we were going to grow that was to start opening multiple locations. And in family business, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. The internal politics can become complicated. So I just kind of wanted to get away from the actual restaurant part and just focus on beer. And I wanted to get out of the family business environment. So I mean, this has never been perceived as being a legacy business that I'm passing on to my children, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what my exit is. It may be a non-exit. So, people will remain shareholders and will go on until they decide to shoot me. But we'll see what happens with that. I just don't know.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, because I think as this industry matures, more and more of the brands that opened kind of in that crest of the first wave of craft beer in the country, I think that's a question that a lot of founders are asking. Is this a legacy business that I'm going to pass on? What is the next step if I choose to retire or pass away or whatever it might be for some of these guys and gals? What does the future look like? So I think it's interesting that's something that you're considering.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we've done over the last several years, I hired Dan Kottman to come on board as CEO. He came from Schlafly in St. Louis, and I brought him on board to help us develop a full management team. Chris is in his role. He's done a fabulous job there. We have a production manager named John Eugenie, so he's doing a great job. We've got Patrice Kirk as our controller. So Julie McGrody is now our sales director, and Sarah West is our director of marketing. So we've really assembled what I consider to be a good, solid management team, so that if I walk out and get hit by a truck tomorrow, I don't think things miss a stitch anywhere. So that really, I mean, having that group in place means that it's no longer super dependent on the quote unquote founder. So whether we affect some sort of transaction or we just decide that hey, just pay down the debt and then do an ESOP, or I don't know, something. I'd like to create some mechanism where if we don't sell it, that there's the ability for people in the organization to begin to get a piece of the rock. I'm not sure exactly how to do that from both a legal and a structural standpoint, because we're a limited partnership now, which makes that a little bit challenging. So maybe we have to change I don't know. So, I mean, but first step was put yourself in a position where it's not dependent on one individual.
In the past 8 years I've been here, when I got here, Hugh was making the bulk of the day-to-day operational decisions, and he's shown the trust and the collaborative efforts to get sort of each of our departments within the brewery to work independently and together to sort of make decisions for the company that we all agree are best for everyone. So he certainly has taken that step back, but inclusive sort of, we're all in this together, and what kind of decisions are we going to make as a group moving forward, keeping all of the sort of shareholders or stakeholders rather in mind as to between the staff and the consumers, as well as the investors in the business. How do we all sort of keep this thing going forward and keep everybody living the dream of heavy seas?
Well, I think that you're in a very unique position as a brand that's celebrating going on 26 years now. When you're able to look at the landscape and draw in talent for every position that has experience in the industry now, because the industry's matured almost at the same rate as your business has, and you have the opportunity to truly prove to any potential employee, staff, management, investor that we have the maturity as a brand, that it's not a risk to join this team or to bring the good ideas here, and you can trust that it's going to be something that's going to be worthwhile for everybody.
I think you're basically right, but this is a hard business. There's nothing easy about doing this. So I would never say that there's not a risk involved in anything. So it's I mean, like I said, I'm personally, I'm very blessed that I've been fortunate enough to be able to surround myself with some really good talent, which then takes a lot of pressure off, and everybody's willing to shoulder and sure, there are disagreements. We don't always see everything eye to eye. We do try to reach consensus on most issues, but you still have to be in a position where at some point somebody says, okay, we're going that way. Otherwise you end up with a camel. You know what a camel is? That's a horse designed by committee. So you don't want to create camels, but you do need to develop that team.
I have two personal anecdotes that I'd like to share with you. My first being that when I moved into my first college apartment in St. Louis, the first six-pack in my fridge was Clipper City. My parents bought it for me at Whole Foods. And the second part being that I was ecstatic when I heard that Dan was joining your team, because I cut my teeth in Schlafly's tap room as a young legal drinker. So two things I just wanted to share. I like my personal ties to your brand well before I even thought of living in Maryland.
Dan's been a really interesting addition to the company. His style and my style are very different. There's no doubt about it. He brings a much greater overall level of supply chain and certain areas of the operational aspects than I have. I think I tend to bring the more entrepreneurial and personality aspects of it. So it's been a very interesting marriage. I think, which has definitely benefited the organization. Although every now and then Dan and I look at each other and go, "What are you doing?"
Well, it's nice to have that balance, isn't it?
No, it's good. I would never want to be in a position where I wasn't being challenged. I think that's important, because that if somebody's not pushing you, and that somebody sometimes is the market, but if somebody's not pushing you you can get fat and happy really, really quickly. And if there's one thing that'll kill you in this business and probably every other business, is complacency is death. So you don't want to go.
Well, and I think that that's a perfect point to yours about there still being a lot of inherent risk in this industry. It's not necessarily the safest industry, especially when you are a brand that is more mature or has seen different, we can call them ebbs and flows or tides of whatever's happening in the market. To sail a ship as big as Heavy Seas, pardon my direct reference to the ship sailing, but
that's all right.
To move that ship in a industry that seems so nimble and has to react so quickly must be a real big challenge.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. That's one of the. I mean, you have to always be in a position where you have a certain level of willingness to reinvent yourself. I mean, you know, we started as Clipper City, we evolved into Heavy Seas, we did a logo change. A couple of years ago, there are going to be definitely some more overall branding changes that are going to happen in the next couple of years because, I mean, you mentioned the risk factors. The first and foremost risk factor is that we're in a consumer products industry. The consumer is fickle, has always been, will always be. So you have to find a way. You can't fall in love completely with any one thing. I mean, here's a quick example. I tend to be a traditionalist. I'm a malt and hops guy. So of all of the beers that are in our core product group, my least favorite is our fastest growing, which is the Tropicana. That's not my thing, but I think it's an awesome product. I think Chris and his team did a phenomenal job developing it. And there's a lot of people out there who think that's the best thing that we've ever done. So, hey, that's what I'm saying. You can't fall in love with your own image. It's really dangerous precedent.
I think that's very insightful. And I think it takes a lot of awareness to be able to see that, especially in this type of industry.
I've stepped in a lot of metamuffins in my years, so I've learned that lesson painfully on a few occasions.
And it's one of those things. You're right. This is a consumer industry, and the consumer is who you're trying to please, not yourself.
No, it ain't about me. It's about them. You know, Dan made a really interesting observation shortly after he came on board, because we were talking about a few things, and he said, you know, we think we own the brand, but we don't. The consumer owns the brand. And as long as we keep that in mind, we'll be okay. And I thought that was very astute.
I think that that's absolutely correct. Chris, kind of on the same point, from your perspective, Heavy Seas and Clipper City were known for a great portfolio of beer. Now consumer demand is changing. You guys are toying around with things in your pilot system that probably Hugh never would have dreamed of seeing go into a brew kettle or a mash tun.
You think?
How has that change been for you? Did you come to this job with the idea of like a traditional background and the willingness to stick to tradition, or were you really looking forward to all these weird new things?
Well, when I got here, still weren't doing too many weird things, I guess you'd say. The beer world hadn't quite shifted to sour and hazy yet. So, you know, the Tropicana development was kind of the first thing, citrus IPAs. I'm similar to Hugh. I mean, I grew up drinking English beers for breakfast. You know, those are my comfort beers. You know, I like hops. I like malt. I like English hops. You know, mild hops, tea-like hops. So, but I, you know, my background is more brew pub before I came here, and it was big brewery. So I scratched a lot of itches for about 10 years, 15 years before I even got here. So I had a lot of experimentation on my own before WC. So really focusing on consistency and quality sort of was my main focus when I arrived at Heavy Seas. But you know, the biggest challenge for a brewer, at least from my perspective, is you know, there's so many young guys and people new to the industry. I've got the greatest recipe. I'm going to make this beer because I love it. And back in the 90s, when I started brewing, you could do that, right? Because people hadn't even tasted the alt beer that I had in my mind. They didn't even know what an alt beer was. So I could make an alt oh, wow, this is great. I love it. So it was a brewer-driven industry, right? It was an artist-driven industry, and that's not really the case anymore, especially for a brewery our size. We have to listen to the market and go with the trend. So the big challenge for me, and where I get a lot of satisfaction now, is brewing a beer for somebody else, right? Brewing a beer that's not for me. A low-calorie beer, or a hazy IPA, or a sour beer. Tropicana is the best example. I mean, this beer right here. I mean, what are we looking at? 20% growth every year, still, Hugh, more or less.
We have been, yeah.
And I mean, I probably have consumed 3 or 4 pints of this in the past 6 years, right? Because it's just not my thing, right? And I didn't.
I've had more than that.
Right. Okay. Well, you're in the field a lot more, so
Right.
But yeah, I have to put myself in the position of, okay, the person who wants this type of beer, what are they looking for? What exactly are the flavor characteristics that excite them that maybe doesn't excite me or Hugh? So we have to be really kind of put ourselves in a third person position of designing a beer for somebody else who has different flavor likes and dislikes. So yeah, that's been challenging, but it's really fun. I mean, it's sort of where the science comes more into play. So you sort of think about a low calorie beer or a low carb beer, and what do we have to do in the lab to develop this beer to make sure that we can be consistent with it and meet the goals of it's only 4 carbs, it's only 95 calories, it's only 4% alcohol, and it's going to be that way and still taste good. Lets me as an artist meet me as a scientist in the middle and go, all right, let's figure out how we're going to solve this problem. And the real challenge is, and this is the $95, $64 question. What is the goal? Like, who are we trying to serve? What do they actually want? And it'd be great if we came up with the next hazy IPA before anybody else did, but we haven't gotten there. I mean, Loose Cannon sort of had that when it hit the scenes. I mean, a really well balanced, hoppy, dry hopped IPA that had a malt backbone with a little Munich malt, a little bitterness. That was fairly unusual, at the time, and it exploded. And can we find that again? Hard to say.
It will.
But we're trying. We're as nimble as we can be, and I think with our small pilot brew house or 15-barrel brew house, we do a lot of R&D type stuff where we learn new techniques, new yeast strains, new different ways of producing beer that maybe we wouldn't have thought of 5 years ago. That give us new inspiration and new efficiencies. Is a big thing. Enzymes. We use a lot of enzymes in our beers now that we never. I didn't even know that would be something that we would be considering 5 years ago. So yeah, I mean, for me as a brewer and as a leader of our brewing team, that this industry keeps moving, keeps me engaged. Right. I still don't know everything, and I'm never going to know everything. And continuing to learn and teach ourselves how to do things, it just never ends, and it's fascinating, right? I mean, I've been a professional brewer now since 1997, and I still haven't found a day recently, certainly since I've been a heavy seas, where I don't feel like getting up in the morning and going to work. Like every day, it's like, all right, what are we going to do today? What are we going to learn today? So it's an ongoing education as we move through this. Like you said, we're a well-established brand, but the moment we start thinking we know everything or know what we're doing, we're doomed. So we have to keep moving forward and keep growing and keep learning, and we have a really good mix. Like Hugh said, our senior staff, amazing group of talented, experienced people, but we've got so many really amazing young people that work in the brewery now that bring their own energy and their own ideas and their own thoughts to all the processes that we go through to keep this brewery afloat. So
you hit a couple of points there that I'd like to kind of address a little bit. The first being this cross between the artistry of crafting beer and the market demand. It's almost as if it feels like it was overnight that the shift went from brewer-driven ideas coming out into the marketplace. Hey, this is what we're producing. This has our signature on it. To almost a, we're doing everything by design because this is what we're hearing that the consumer wants. Like that shift happened so fast. How did you feel that you were prepared for that?
Let me take that briefly first, Chris, and then you handle it. It seems like it happened faster than I think it did.
Okay.
I think a lot of one of the things that we really try to focus on, and that Chris and his team have been extremely helpful with, is what I call moving from seat of the pants production to professional production. And that leads you to what I call professional quality. And what I mean by that is there's subjective quality and there's objective quality. So subjective quality is I only like vanilla ice cream. You make the best chocolate ice cream in the world, but I don't think it's very good because I don't like chocolate ice cream. All right. That's subjective quality. Objective quality is I made it, you bought it, you liked it, you decide you want to buy it again. When you pick it up, it better be the damn same. And so I think what we try to focus on is seeing what the consumer appears to be interested in. And so even though Tropicana might be my personal cup of tea, I don't think everybody should like everything anyway, but I do take great pride in the fact that we've got that dialed in. When you buy it, you're going to get the same experience time after time after time. And that to me is professional quality. So that's something to which we have aspired. And because of that, I think that sometimes our product development curve might be a little longer than some others. I mean, if you're only making 2,000 barrels of beer a year and you just want to throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall, who cares? Because nobody's expecting it to be the same way twice.
Right.
But when you're doing what we're trying to do, which is the long game as opposed to the short game, and I don't mean that as a dig, so please don't interpret. But when you're trying to do it that way, you have to be a little more deliberate in your approach. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if you want specifics, I'll give you a beer example. So we recently released Hazy Canyon, right? It's a hazy IPA, 7.25% alcohol. But from my perspective, we did it really quickly, and that product development was about a year long. And for me, that was really too fast, right? A smaller brewery may bang something out in a month, right, or 6 weeks. Because we knew that we wanted the brand to be consistent. We wanted the beer to taste the same, look the same, smell the same, sound the same every single time we make it. So when it's a style of beer that you haven't historically made for, consistently for a number of years, you sort of aren't. You can do all the research and science you want to predict all of the challenges you're going to face, but inevitably something comes up you weren't expecting, right? So time usually helps when it comes to that. But we do a lot of experimentation with our 15-barrel brew house that gives us techniques and ideas that help us develop some of these beers. So I'm hoping that we're finding better ways to be more efficient in our product development in terms of timing. And I think we've done a pretty good job the last year or so in doing so. But to Hugh's point, I mean, sometimes you don't want to go into the market with a new product, right? Is it going to stay hazy? Is it going to stay clear? Are the hops going to fade too quickly? And then from a production standpoint, a beer like a hazy IPA, this particular beer uses a very large percentage of oats and wheat. So the physical operation of brewing this beer is arduous and it's booming. So will we be able to manage that if it becomes a super popular beer? It takes twice as long to make it. So we found ways to do it differently with enzymes and some other things that we maybe wouldn't have thought of in the past, by a lot of the research and science that we're able to do with our tap room releases and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else. Continuing to learn and experiment with not only the beers but your process, right? How do we get to this end product? Are we just gonna, let's say 6 years ago, we wanted to come up with a new Pilsner. Oh, well, I've made Pilsners before. We don't even need to do a trial batch. How do you want it to taste? Oh, I can make it taste like that. No problem. I've made Pilsners for years. Boom. Pilsner comes, put in the can, put in the bottle, tastes good, looks good. It's a Pilsner. Not a big deal. A beer like a Tropicana or a Hazy Cannon that is maybe has some unique ingredients or brewing techniques or styles, or just isn't our strength or something we've done a lot of in the past. We want to be sure that we can do it, as Hugh says, professionally, and make sure that the consumer is not disappointed when they purchase our beer. But beer's not cheap, and we want to make sure they're getting what they pay for.
To Hugh's point about professional quality, I take that to heart. I spent almost 10 years working with your former brewmaster, Tom Flores. He was my coworker at Brewers Alley and Monoxy Brewing Company, and I heard essentially that same commitment to quality from him the entire time I worked with him. The expectation of the consumer should always align with what you're delivering, and you should be able to do that consistently.
The other thing you need to keep in mind is I don't make my living because you bought the beer the first time. I make my living because you bought it the second and the third and the fourth.
Yep. And I think that's important for everybody in your organization to understand from the top down. The experience, whether it's in the bottle, in the can, in the glass in your tasting room, that experience and the quality of service, the quality of taste, whatever it be, is what's going to bring that guest back to you and earn the dollar a second time.
Yeah.
Chris, I think you had a really awesome point there about kind of the projection of what this beer could be if it kind of, strikes right at the right time and it becomes hot like Loose Cannon did. Is it something you can support through all of your resource acquisition and your ability to get everything you need to make that beer? Are you finding now that kind of trying to go after things that are a little bit hot and maybe picking up some steam in your pilot system, are you finding that acquisition is tough with the number of breweries that are out there?
No, I mean in terms of actually getting the ingredients we need.
Are you seeing big ingredient restrictions?
Yeah. So a lot of what we do with the with some of our product development is sort of led by what we already know we can get. So this beer, Hazy Cannon, is heavy on Citra hops, right? And we already have Citra hops heavily contracted for the next few years. It's a component of Loose Cannon. So we knew when we developed this beer, well, let's make sure that we use hops that we know we can get, that we already are committed to buying. There's some mosaic hops in this too, but on a smaller percentage, and really based on what the availability of those hops are going to be for the next 3 years to us. We certainly don't let those things drive the flavor of the beer necessarily. But when we have substitutions and things that we can work in, that we might have a surplus, or we might know that we could swap out easily for a different variety, then we'll do it. And certain beers, over time will change just based on, ingredients change every year, right? I mean, agricultural products are never, they're not going to be the same year after year. The bitterness level, the flavor components. I actually did a sort of a hop academy last week with the folks at Haas, and we did this sort of hand rub smell evaluation of some Chinook hops, and I don't recall Chinook hops being that amazing. Like they were just really fruity and citrus forward. I'm used to Chinook just being piney and sort of one-dimensional as a bittering hop. And we have some Chinooks on contract, and when we go to selection the end of the year, if I can get some of the ones that smelled like that, we may find a place for them in some of these beers that we already make, right? So one of the things that we kind of look at is more of of a flavor and aroma profile, not necessarily it's 25% Citra, 20% Amarillo, etc. We say, okay, it needs to have this amount of grapefruit, this amount of mango, passion fruit, all the flavors that are in there. So when we're going to be true to brand, true to style within the company from a sensory evaluation standpoint, if we use some Azacca hops in the boil of Tropicana versus Amarillo hops, you may not be able to tell the difference in the end product if we apply it the right way. So we have to be flexible in the way we produce the beer over the years. We've been pretty good. Hugh mentioned him earlier, John Eugenie, our production manager, who's also in charge of all the procurement. He's a wizard. He's just he whatever we need, we get it, right, one way or the other. So, but we leave ourselves all kinds of contingencies. Certainly, more so in the way that we want the beer to taste, look, smell, feel a certain way, and it's not strictly this hop or that hop or this malt or that malt. We may change malt suppliers over the years. Like we used to use Thomas Fawcett crystal malt or caramel in Loose Cannon. We now use Proximity Malt, which is a local company sending us malt from Delaware, and the flavor of the beer is the same, right? Because we did trials and tests and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of things you can substitute, even if they don't sound like it would be the same match, but we make sure that they are. And sometimes it's even so far as, all right, well, if we're going to use this hop versus that hop, we have to we have to use a little more Citra this time. And again, these changes, similar to your analogy earlier with, a slow-moving ship, we never make major shifts in our recipes or the ingredients that we use. We try to limit our exposure to, oh my gosh, we can't get any Simcoe hops. Are you crazy? Well, now we can't make this beer, this beer, or this beer. We don't. We kind of protect ourselves that way. One of the biggest mistakes I think I made in the past when I was younger was I made a beer with one hop that everybody loved, and then when I went to make it again, I couldn't get that hop. So, 100%.
From a branding standpoint, don't forget the company was originally Clipper City Brewing, and Heavy Seas still picks up that same thought. One thing you have to keep in mind is if you've ever been a sailor, there are no straight lines in sailing. It's all about tweak, and then try to get there. Yeah. So there really was a little more method to the madness and some of that conceptual stuff in the beginning than people may realize.
I think it's really a great point that you're bringing up. We're very fortunate here in Maryland that we have so many young breweries and breweries that have a couple years under their belt. Everything is still fairly novel with what they're putting out. They're still seeing a lot of success with new ideas. And pardon me, I may sneeze in a second. But I just felt the allergy whoosh come over my head. I apologize. But I think it's real. You're in a really great place when you have the idea of what your beer is supposed to taste like. You know what Loose Cannon should taste like. And if you fall short on an ingredient or an aromatic profile is falling short of what you expected it to be, you know enough how to adjust it to get it to, like you just said, Hugh, tweak to get it to where it's supposed to go. And land there. And
that's also what makes it so interesting all the time.
True.
And Chris touched on it, a minute ago, and I've been making this point for years. We are making these products with agricultural products. Agricultural products are not widgets. So part of the art of this is that you're constantly making small changes to formula and recipe to deal with the changes that Mother Nature is presenting you. In the wine industry, it's called vintage. Well, we don't have vintages for beer, well, for the most part. So here we're trying to create the same thing over and over again. Interesting, and only interesting analogy in the wine industry is non-vintage champagne, where the blend is, I'm sure, a little bit different every single time they put it together.
So that experience is always happening.
Same thing with blended Scotch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how large of you brought up your sensory evaluations. How large of a group do you use for sensory at Heavy Seas? Is this something that you have people from all all different positions within the company working towards, or is this strictly a production experience?
Yeah, we've gone through a couple different iterations of that over the last few years. We have a quality manager now. Matt Cottrell's been here not quite a year now, and Matt comes from a research scientist background. He's a PhD in some type of environmental science. I'm not sure, but his brain is way bigger than mine. I don't understand how it works, but Matt really focuses on off flavors from more of a specific standpoint, I guess. So we'll do a diacetyl check on the beers to make sure we're dropping the temperature in the fermenter at the right time, right? So we make sure that fermentation is complete and the conditioning stage is full enough that we can cool the beer down. And for a while before Matt got here, we were doing it analytically. So we were actually doing a distillation and then running the distillate through a spectrophotometer to give us some numbers to tell us whether the precursor to diacetyl, which is bisphenol diketones, exist in the beer and what that number was. And when it fell below a certain number, we knew it was okay. Well, Matt said, that's great. That's a really good way to be certain, but we can do it with a sensory analysis. And, you've got 2 samples of the beer. One, we're gonna cook in a water bath for however long, 10 minutes or whatever, cool it down. Then we're gonna taste them side by side. If you can't tell the difference between the two, it's good to go, set it out. So Matt has done some, and I'm just using this one off flavor as an example. Matt has done some sensory evaluations of staff members to see what their diacetyl threshold is. And if their threshold is, at a certain point or better, then they're an approved diacetyl checker. So, there may be 6 of the 14 people who are working today are approved VDK checkers, and he'll ask them, hey, I'm going to do VDK in an hour. Are you free? Yeah, I can be over there. And then Kurt and Jacob and Mike will go over and they'll test it, and they'll be like, yeah, that one passes, that one doesn't. We'll go from there. So sensory is different in a lot of different places. One of the things that I push really hard on all the brewers and even the packaging guys is taste everything. Taste all the time. You're milling in a bag of Munich malt because our base malt comes in from a silo, but all the specialty malts get dumped in a hopper by hand. Every bag you open, taste it, because someday you're going to open a bag, you're going to taste it, and you're going to go, wait a second, that doesn't taste right? So you put yourself, you get your mind working. It's the same as what you said about loose cannon, right? If you taste loose cannon every day, and I'm not talking about having a whole loose cannon every day, but you taste the loose cannon out of the bright tank after you filtered it. Just taste it, smell it. You know what it tastes like. You sort of condition your mind and your mouth and your nose and everything to sort of know what things are supposed to taste like over time. And then the science part becomes, it almost becomes human, right? That I already know the answer. I mean, we can run this test, but I already know the answer because I know what that's supposed to taste like, and that's not right. I don't know why it's not right, or I do know why it's not right. I'll bet you if we run this through the such and such, we'll find acetaldehyde because it's just not good. Or did we dry hop this correctly? Because I'm not getting the same citrus notes I usually get. And then you'll go back and you'll look, well, it looks like we dry hopped right. Who was the dry hopper? Oh, Chad, did you do this? What happened here? He said, oh, that's right. That's all right. Flip-flop those. It was supposed to be Citra, and I used Cascade. Okay, no big deal. We can blend it out with another batch of beer that we have in the works coming forward. But, it becomes fun. It becomes challenging to sort of make sure that the beer's correct at every step along the way and blend the sensory with the science, right? So, we're plating stuff. You're looking on plates to see if there's anything growing. And if it is, what is it? Is it really a problem? Because sometimes it isn't. Usually it isn't, actually. We don't necessarily have a strict sensory program at Heavy Seas at this moment where at every day at 1 o'clock, people come in and sit down and taste the beers. We have done that in the past. And the person running the quality department at the time, that information was really valuable to her, the way she worked. The way Matt works is a little different. and he gets to the same conclusions with different methods. So it's kind of neat to see how that works. And we visit other breweries and see how they do things. And there are apps where we've used them in the past where you taste the beer and it smells correct, it looks correct. You click it on there, passes muster, and move on from there. So for us, it's just as many people as possible. I liken it to sports. I relate a lot of things to sports, as if I'm a coach, more so than a manager, and say, we got to pick each other up here, right? Because I'm not going to hit a home run every time I bat, right? And if I strike out, somebody else has got to hit a home run, right? So who's it going to be, right? So if he didn't catch it, if he didn't catch the error when he dry hopped it, the next guy during the next shift can go, wait a second, you didn't write down the right hop. And it's not a policing thing, it's a teamwork thing. To me, it's like we're all working together, and it's like, oh man, thanks for picking me up on that. I didn't realize I did that.
It's not to throw this guy under the bus, it's to ensure that the brand looks good when it gets to the market and the product's right.
You're helping. Yeah,
it's not about trying to throw somebody under the bus.
Right,
I mean,
it's about making this correctly.
Something right. If you have a problem that's repeating, then that's a different issue.
Yeah, right.
But the name of the game here is we're all flawed. We're all human. None of us is perfect. But from an organizational standpoint, can we continue to move this thing in a positive direction? And I mean, that's what the commitment is.
That's awesome. We're getting a lot of comments from our friend Christian at Frank About Beer. He's put a ton of them in here, and they're actually a great segue. We have about 15, 20 minutes left in this conversation. So we've spent a lot of time talking about Heavy Seas, this large brand with a great history. But in the last couple of years, you've introduced this smaller system. You're taking on some interesting risks with new releases. You're celebrating consumer demand. You've got some kick-ass artwork coming out through some really great partners. And Christian's hitting it on the head. And the first question he has about the small system was, what issues do you experience on that 15-barrel system versus a 180-barrel system or whatever size the brew house is there at Heavy Seas? Do you see brewing on the smaller system presenting its own set of challenges?
That's totally you, Chris.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So fortunately, I guess for us, I have a long background in having worked in a small brewery. So I've worked in small breweries and large breweries. So again, the thing that's nice about what we do in the 15-barrel brew house for the most part is the consistency, and Hugh mentioned this earlier, is not the goal. The goal is to make something really interesting and fun. So the targets are wider, right? So we're going to make an 8% alcohol beer. For example, if it's 8.5 because the evaporation rate on the small kettle was more than we thought it would be, so be it, right? We're not going to sweat it, we're not going to worry about it, but we're going to share it with everybody and see what their reaction is. Usually, I'd say where in the big brew house we have a lot of numbers, we have flow meters, we have pressure sensors with levels and things like that. So we can get a beer brewed to about 98% of spec every single time, no matter who's brewing. In the 15-barrel brew house, it's more like, I'd say it's about 90% when I brew. And then, if I have somebody else brew, if my communication with them on what the goals are not ideal, or I've screwed up in that respect, then maybe we're 85% to our target. But, to give you an example, so the most recent one we made was a lemon meringue, juice cannon lemon meringue pie. So this beer is 7.25% alcohol. It is hazy. There's lots of oats, lots of wheats, lots of citra hops, and then a whole lot of lemon juice and a good dose of lactose. I even put a hint of vanilla in it, just a little tiny bit, to give it that meringue sort of flavor. But the thing about this that's nice is, so we'll brew it, and imagine what we'll plan out the lemon flavor that we think we're going to need. And I'll put, but in this case, I think I put 8 gallons of lemon juice in the 10-barrel batch. And we tasted it as a group. We're like, I think we could put a little more lemon juice in there. So we put a little more lemon juice in. And we put a little too much in. Let's put a little more lactose. So we'll
just keep playing the citrus off the sweet. You get it all day.
A little bit, right? And we can't do that with all the beers we make in the small brew house. But a beer like this, it's fun, right? And the beer before this was called Bottomless, and last year we did Bottomless Mimosa, so it was a mimosa-inspired beer, and we brewed it with enzymes and a lot of rice, and it was super dry. We had a little bit of orange juice and some citric acid in the tank, and again, we were able to do that sort of to taste, as opposed to in the big brew house, we really can't do that. We have to make sure we have the recipe really dialed in. So this year we did the Bottomless again, and it was a Bellini inspired. So we did the dry brew again, and this time it was peach. But peach is not really a strong flavor, right? So the aroma of peach is really hard to sort of find. We used a lot of peach puree and a lot of peach juice, but it just never seemed to be enough. So a little more citric acid than maybe we would have used sort of opened it up a little bit. So, I mean, it's a little more trial and error in the small brew house. The other thing about the small brew house that's really kind of fun and interesting is these are beers I personally would never think of making, right? So the marketing team, Sarah and her team, come up with these ridiculous ideas, at least where I'm concerned, to start, and then they pull me in, right? And they'll say, "Wait a second, Chris. I know it's not an English pale ale, but a beer inspired by the Baltimore Snowball that tastes like egg custard is what everybody wants." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I can't do that." Wait, maybe I can do that. And then I'll start thinking, and then we'll start talking. All right, well, wait a second. Explain that flavor to me again. All right, let me go get an egg custard Snowball. See what it tastes like. All right, it's vanilla cream. There's no egg, and sort of brings us as brewers into a different world and having to think about some connection to a non-beer world, like the lemon meringue pie, which I can wrap my brain around lemon meringue pie pretty easily. Snowball, not so much. We did a key lime pie beer last year, which I thought was phenomenal because I knew when they said what they wanted, we want a key lime pie hazy IPA. Okay, that makes sense because I've had key lime pie and I like it, so I can make a beer that tastes like that. So sometimes you'll get this inspiration from these incredibly creative people that are telling you that you can do this, Chris. You can make this. I know you can. I know you can do it, and we find a way to do it. And sometimes we have to play around and make sure the lemon, the amount of lemon juice we use was nothing too much. It's really fun, and we get really excited when we have new beer.
I love your commitment and mental dexterity to be able to come up with how to make these flavors, because looking at some of the beer trades out there, it would seem that you could just throw some trolley peach rings in your Bellini and you would accomplish what you were looking for, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we still have this, unending quest for quality, right? So to me, it's not going to just be pouring a bunch of blackberry puree in the beer at the end. I want the beer to be balanced. I still want it to taste good. I want it to be drinkable. I don't want it to be like, oh, that tastes really fun and interesting, but I can't even finish the beer.
Right.
I still want it to be a beer that you're going to consume. And again, I keep going back to the Snowball beer because, I brewed a beer for Hugh and me to start. It was all Maris Otter malts. There was a little bit of English hops in there. We used an English yeast. It was a beautiful English pale ale. And then I went ahead and added all kinds of vanilla, cinnamon, and a few other things, secret ingredients to turn it into an egg custard flavored vanilla cream, if you will. But it had a dry finish, right? So it wasn't sweet, it wasn't cloying, and it actually wasn't bad. Like I could drink a whole pint of it. And I didn't want 4 pints of it, but I wasn't the target consumer, right?
But you wouldn't need 4 egg custard snowballs, would you?
I probably wouldn't. No, I probably wouldn't need one. I'm more of a root beer guy, but so it's fun. Anytime I've found that anytime we can connect the consumer to a different part of their life here, it resonates, right? This is my favorite. We did a collaboration with a local candy company last fall. Truffle stout, and we used 21 pounds of chocolate candies in the beer. They're a local candy maker here in Baltimore, not too far from here on Caton Avenue. Been here for 100 years, and people were like, "I love Reb's candies. Oh, you made a beer with my favorite candy," and it sold out really quickly. And again, I think the beer was pretty good too. So those sort of things, speak to people. Outside of making quality, consistent products, making something that's still fun and still makes you laugh a little bit, or say, "Ah, man, I remember having a snowball when I was a kid." And this year we're going to do a new flavor this year. I mean, we're going to do the egg custard again because it's still really popular. But last year we did Skylight was the second color, so I had to make a blue beer, which was fun. And this year we're going to do something else. I can't reveal what it is. I'll leave that to the marketing folks to tease that when it's time. But it will probably be whatever the third most popular snowball flavor is.
Crooked Crab and Firm were doing a collaboration brew for BAM the day you guys released the blue one, and they brought one into the tasting room and they were pouring it around, and the color of that was phenomenal. I was looking at that like, this is out of this world, man.
Yeah, and that one was I tried to get I may have overthought that one a little bit. Tried to get clever and make a hazy pale ale, and so it would be different than the other snowball. Like, I didn't want us to come up with like, all right, this is the base beer for snowball. We just flavor it vanilla, or we flavor it cherry or red strawberry. I wanted each beer to be its own entity. So that one was more, that had a little more hop flavor to it.
You guys might be the best group of guests to have this question posed, but Kevin threw in the comment that he's doing an apprenticeship with the ABG, American Brewers Guild. And like, any advice that you guys can offer regarding other things he can do to get into the industry and be successful as this market is changing?
That's you, Chris.
Yeah, well, I would say, Kevin, you're already in a very good place. I am an American Brewers Guild graduate, 1997, believe it or not.
Is that still Steve Parks?
Steve Parks, yeah, he was my instructor. And your resume is going to be better than 95% of the ones that I see just by having the education. So many people are trying to get into the beer business with zero experience and zero education. So the education you're getting there is going to be fantastic. Technically, you'll have a very strong footing there. But yeah, I mean, just be open-minded. I mean, I don't know what your personal situation is, but a lot of times when people start in the beer business, they want to make their own beer and they want to be, a rock star and all that sort of thing. And we sometimes have a hard time recruiting folks to come work in a shift brewer environment, if you will. But I would recommend doing that, because the things you'll learn about quality and consistency and doing things the right way, quote unquote, the right way, in a larger brewery, even if the pay is a little bit lower, some of the other perks are better. I mean, you're done your shift after 8 hours in our brewery, for example. All the other things you get with a sort of a larger company, 401k, insurance, all that good stuff. So I would look towards a big brewery, a larger craft brewery, to start your career as a good foundation. You want to move on from there, knock yourself out. I mean, I think I have 7 or 8 former brewers who are running breweries themselves right now. Always was sad to see them go, but happy to see them successful, including Henry Jaeger at Firm. Henry left us in 2018, I think.
Something like that.
and he had been here for 5+ years, and it was sad to see him go. But at the same time, whatever advice and help I could give him, I did, and I continue to. So, just a large brewery, you can develop some relationships and get to know sort of how to be a brewer, or how to be,
how to really be a brewer.
Yeah,
I think that's excellent advice.
Until you haul hoses and clean tanks, and work an overnight shift, you maybe aren't quite facing all the challenges that a day-to-day brewer goes through. And it's not for everyone. People have gotten, come into the brewery and worked and been gung-ho to be brewer, and then they're like, you know what? I don't think this is for me, right? We have a guy working for us now who worked as a brewer for, I think 15+ years. And he came to us and said, no, I want to work in packaging. It's really? Yeah. Okay. And he's happy as a clam, man. He comes in and runs the can filler or the bottle filler, and he hasn't shoveled out the hop back since he got here. So, it's to each his own, I guess. So
must be more fun to clean the packaging equipment than do grain out, huh?
I guess.
Well, yeah. And the other thing, I mean, it's hard work, even in super automated facilities. It's still hard work, and a lot of people, they have this romantic vision of what this is,
right? And
that and reality are pretty divergent. There's still a lot of creativity. And I used to say, my analogy when I was doing all the brewing at the brew pub, it was hot and sweaty, and my T-shirt was 2/3 filled with beer, and I stank. But there was a whole tank of beer. I could put my hand on that, so that was my reward, and then I could go to the bar.
There was a tangible and consumable end to your workday.
Correct.
And that is very rewarding. Anthony would like to know who's coming up with the names of the beers. Is this a let's build a camel situation, or is this something that somebody's got a hot idea and that's what makes the label?
I used to do most of it, and we're trying to make that more and more sort of lots of different input. One of the great challenges right now is that there's 6,000 new breweries in the last 6 years. And finding, I've come up with some brilliant names only to find out somebody's already there. So that's becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. And we tend to be pretty buttoned up as far as intellectual property and trademarks are concerned, and are very respectful of other people who've actually taken the time to do it. There has definitely been a challenge in the last several years because there's a lot of guys or folks who have not done their due diligence on names. And so it's a challenge, but names are important.
They truly are. And I think that, especially for a brand like Heavy Seas, having consistency in those names and an identifiable product rather than something where you're just like, throwing darts at the wall, really has a lot more impact.
It certainly helps keep the brand sort of with a focus.
Sure.
I tripped into Loose Cannon a bunch of years ago, and that absolutely is a great name for a beer. And I've been trying to come up with another one ever since.
You'll get there.
Not quite pulled it off. But.
So to round today's talk out, I know we discussed a few beers throughout this. Do we want to specifically point at any of these beers or kind of showcase any of them? I don't want to keep either of you much longer than we discussed, but that's the beer that I'm quite interested in, the one that both of you started drinking.
Yes. So again, this is from the R&D department of Heavy Seas. Drink low-cal, hazy IPA with some key lime. And again, some of the things that come out of the small brew house sort of inspire us a little bit. So I had mentioned the key lime pie IPA. That key lime flavor seemed to really be something that people liked a lot. So we had also worked with some enzymes. So knowing that in order to make a low-calorie beer, you really can't have any sugar left in the beer. So we ferment this thing out dry, so there is no residual sugar left whatsoever. We use a lot of oats, we use a lot of wheat, and then really floral hops, fruit forward hops. Citra. We use some Simcoe Cryo hops in the dry hop, and we dry hop it early, like a normal, like most people do with hazy IPAs. And we had just enough key lime in the kettle to give it that extra little citrus aroma and flavor. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic beer. The hotter it gets, the better this beer is going to be. Super crisp. The mouthfeel is it's, you know, I wouldn't, you know, it's on the thin side from a mouthfeel standpoint, but you would expect that in a beer this low in alcohol and calories. But the flavor is there. I mean, it has a huge.
It doesn't taste like a light beer.
No, it has a huge citrus aroma, and it finishes really clean. Really nice beer, and we're really excited about it. I think the art's nice, the white can. I mean, everything. So again, from my, you know, one of the things I sort of mentioned earlier is, to me, the best beer in the world, and Hugh mentioned this earlier with the chocolate and vanilla analogy. The best beer in the world is the one that tastes exactly the way I was expecting it would taste, right? So when I pick up a can of this, drink low cal, and it's got 95 calories and 4 carbs written on the top, and there's a bright sun with a line there, and it says hazy IPA and with key lime. It meets all my expectations. So I think from that standpoint, it's a fantastic product, and I hope it does really well for us, because it's something I think people will enjoy. And as we get out of this COVID nonsense and get out in the sun a little bit more, it's going to be a really good option for people.
I agree.
Is that available in the trade right now?
Oh yeah, for sure. 12
Yeah.
packs, 6 packs and 12 packs, and then on draft also. Can only, no bottles. So,
That's a beautiful label.
yeah, so
I love that art. That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I truly appreciate it. What can people do to support Heavy Seas now and in the foreseeable future? And where can they catch up?
Tap room reopens May 2nd.
Ooh, that's great news.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, to that question, Hugh, there was one more comment that I wasn't going to ask, but I will. When you guys start doing tours again, when are you personally leading them?
I'm not sure yet, but I will definitely put my hand back in the ring on that.
Very well.
Remember, I'm the chief baby shaker and hand kisser.
So follow Heavy Seas on all of their social media. They're very easy to find. Look for that kick-ass skull that you see in the background. It is the marker that you will see every time you're looking for them. Find Heavy Seas beer on draft at your favorite local beer retailer, and in cans and bottles, almost every format you can imagine to buy beer, you can get Heavy Seas beer. Gentlemen,
Awesome.
Thank you both very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to anybody out there?
Thank you for your support.
There you go. Man, you're good at that baby shaking job there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Have a safe weekend. I look forward to chatting with both of you very soon, and hopefully we get to see each other in person and have a beer soon. For everybody else who's tuning in this afternoon, thanks for spending an hour with us. We appreciate seeing you and hearing from you every week. MarylandBeer.org for all of your Maryland beer updates, and we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.